Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for liking my video and subscribing to my channel. It really means a lot to me. And I just want to apologize that we are in a dungeon right now. It is the darkest and stormiest day ever. I usually have some natural lighting from my windows, but I've put up all the lights that I can, and it is still like a dungeon in here. All right, so I posted on Instagram a little poll, and this topic got some votes, which is how to stop worrying. I also feel like a hypocrite making this video because I do worry a lot. However, I'm a lot better than I was a few years ago, thanks to some of the tips that I'm gonna go over today. So obviously worrying is something that we can all relate to. It can be small things such as what am I gonna eat for lunch tomorrow, or it can be big things such as where am I gonna go to school, or where am I gonna move, what job am I gonna apply for? And the list goes on and on and on. And I just wanted to say before I begin, which I know I say this in every video, but I am currently not licensed or certified, and the information I'm giving out is just based off of my personal experience, the people around me, and the research that I've done. All right, so the first thing I do is that I become aware, I become mindful of when I am worrying. And I know some people will say, well, obviously I know when I'm worried, but sometimes you're not aware just how worried you actually are, because a lot of the worry can manifest in other areas. So we can feel the tension in our bodies. And there's this quote that I came across the other day, and it was like, if you're reading this right now, unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders, take a deep breath, into that knot in your stomach. So my point is that sometimes we're more worried than we're even aware of. For an example, for myself, when I'm driving to work, especially if there's traffic, and let's just say I check the GPS and I'm just gonna be on time, or I'm gonna be a little bit late, or I could be really late. And the entire time I'm driving, it's literally like my shoulders are tense, everything is tense, I'm holding onto the steering wheel, I'm looking around trying to weave around as many people as I can, I'm panicking, I'm speeding, all of these things. And that's when I realized, whoa, I need to calm down, because this entire drive, I'm just gonna be like so stressed and worried. That also happens to me before I go to sleep, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like I'm laying in bed and I don't even realize that my jaw is actually clenched and my whole body is just like tense, and I'm thinking about the next day and everything that I have to do. So that brings me to my first tip, which is when you catch yourself in that moment, when you're mindful of how worried you are, you need to realize that worrying will not change one single thing. There is literally no point in worrying, because it's not going to do anything for your current situation. It is not going to change anything. In fact, the only thing that it's going to do is steal your current peace and happiness. So those are the moments that I realize when I'm sitting in my car and I feel so tense, that by me sitting there trying to weave around some people, maybe that's going to save me 1 minute or maybe 2 minutes altogether. But by me sitting there being so tense, it's actually not going to change anything. And same with when I'm laying in bed before I go to sleep. If I'm running everything over and over and over and over a million different ways in my mind, it is not going to change anything for the next day. So whether I sit in my car listening to music, calm and enjoying myself, or I sit there like, oh my God, I'm sweating and I'm going nuts, either way, it's not going to change the outcome. Which brings me to my second point, which is give yourself time to worry about it. And I know that sounds weird, but basically what I mean by that is, so let's say so I'm laying in bed at night and I'm thinking about the next day and everything that I have to worry about, but I need to get my sleep because that is going to affect me for the next day. So that's when I say, okay, I'm going to be calm right now. I'm going to allow myself to have a good sleep, because thinking about it right now is not going to change anything by the time I wake up. So tomorrow morning, I give myself 30 minutes to worry about it. So let's say the next morning comes, I wake up, I do something positive, listen to a positive YouTube video, then I say, okay, it's time to worry. I don't really mean worry, I mean problem solve. And the way that you can problem solve is you get out your notepad, or you go onto the computer, you open up a Word document, and you start addressing specifically the things that you're worrying about, and start thinking of solutions and actually write them out, start addressing different solutions. And that way you're actually problem solving, and you're giving yourself a time to do it instead of letting it just sit in your head all day and all night. It's kind of the same idea as, let's say, when you go through a breakup and people say you have to give yourself a certain amount of time to be upset over it. It's sort of the same thing. You have to give yourself a time frame. Otherwise, you're going to carry that worry everywhere you go, all day, when you go to work, with the loved ones that you interact with, when you go to sleep, when you're driving. You're just going to be carrying that burden with you, and it's not actually going to change anything. And that brings me to my third point. So my dad always says to me to not worry about things, because 80 to 90% of the things that we worry about don't happen, and the other 10% we didn't have control over anyways. By the way, my dad very rarely worries, so he practices what he preaches when it comes to this. So we were talking about it the other day because we don't know where this percentage came from. Like, we're like, did you make this up? Or I don't know. So I actually Googled it and I found the quote, and it's actually a very good quote. So it says 85% of what subjects worried about never happened. 85%. 85% of what subjects worried about never happened. And with the 15%, I just spit everywhere, with the 15% that did happen, 79% of subjects discovered either that they could handle the difficulty better than expected, or the difficulty taught them a lesson worth learning. So that just goes to show that 85% of the things we worry about don't happen, and if they do happen, then we learn something from it. And that's why we make mistakes anyways, because that's how we learn and that's how we grow. And it's also important to keep a track record of all the times that things did work out for you. So again, if 85% of the things we worry about don't happen, then when you think about it, you can think about all of the times that things did work out for you, and then that will give you confidence that this too will also work out for you. All right, and my last point is you have to think about the worst case scenario. Now, I'm a very positive person, so normally I would never say to look at the negative, but the reason why, and again, my dad always says this to me, is look at the worst case scenario and will you die? The answer is usually always no. And this can apply to any situation. If you're worried about anything, sometimes it's better to think about the absolute worst case scenario and realize it is not going to be the end of the world. So I'm just going to share a really quick story where my dad helped me out and where this happened. But basically, I started at a new job at one point and I never get sick, but I ended up getting sick like 3 times within the first 3 weeks of my job. So I had a million sick days that I took, and that was really frustrating for me because that's not who I am. I don't call in sick. I always show up. I'm always on time, etc. And the reason why I was panicking and freaking out was because I didn't want my boss and my other colleagues to think that I was lying or that I was lazy, or even if they knew that I was actually sick, it didn't matter to me. The point is that I wasn't there. So when I was freaking out and telling my dad about this, he was like, what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario. And worst case scenario, absolute worst, is that they would fire me. And I know that sounds really bad, but that is the absolute worst case scenario. They could speak to me and say this is unacceptable. They could give me one last warning. They could do a write-up. And the worst case scenario is that I would get fired. And even though that sounds horrible, at the end of the day, that would not be the end of the world, because I would be able to get myself back on my feet and apply and get a new job. Even though that would be really sad and really inconvenient, but at the same time, I would also learn something from that experience, and I would probably think, you know what, I wasn't meant to be here anyways. There is something better for me. All right, so that's it. I hope that helps you guys worry a little bit less. Again, I have to take my own advice. I am constantly trying to apply all of these things, but I do worry a lot. So again, just to recap, we have to be mindful of when we are very stressed. The next thing we need to do is realize that worrying is not going to change one single thing. And if we're still worrying, then we need to give ourselves time to worry and to problem solve. We also need to realize that 85% of the things we worry about don't happen. And lastly, we need to think about the worst case scenario and is it going to kill us? So I'm going to end this video off with a quote, which is, "Worry never robs tomorrow of its sorrow. It only saps today of its joy." All right, so that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and all of that. And again, if you guys follow me on Instagram, I'm gonna put polls up and ask you, oh my God, from talking too much, and ask you what type of topics you guys want me to talk about. And also, if you just have any topics that you want to suggest to me, then please feel free to message me on Instagram or message me here on YouTube. So once again, thank you guys so much, and I will see you next week. Bye.